strategic agility, leadership and vision, of knowing where you want to go, but because life is complex, having that sort of fluidity to navigate, I don't know what you call it, what are we navigating? The waves or something we're navigating to get through, which requires this element of flexibility. But if you're in a context where people are a bit rigid, you might be pushed back all the time. So that in a sense you're paced and purposeful, you're strategically incremental. I mean, all these sort of words are the words, you know, that would imply in this. So there was a quite diverse range of opinions on this, and it was extremely interesting to me, because the main comments were, we've seen all that's positive, you know, the leadership getting better and improving. So the general atmosphere was a positive atmosphere, by the way. And this I'd never really come across, was this agility, the big weakness, because partly because of that, I don't want to call it confrontational, but these camps of, yes, let's say pro-development, anti-development or whatever else, this question of being flexible and operating through these things was seen as a major weakness. That's an ordinary leader, the one on the right who just does what people say, I want more car parking, and delivers. That other person on the left is the person who's able to tell a story of the city, where we're going, that inspires people to get rid of their self-interest and do things they normally perhaps wouldn't do. This talent and learning landscape, what is that landscape? And that is, you know, how much self-organised stuff, formal learning in classic institutions like universities. I mean, in broad terms, I mean, as you can see, people felt there is quite a lot. There's a quantity of institutions which is quite enviable, particularly if you also include sort of cultural stuff. And one of the comments made was that people perhaps, we've summarised it as reserve their efforts for elsewhere, in the sense they've been created here, they've learned here, but in fact someone else benefits from that and they put their energy elsewhere. So, but in broad terms, people felt this is an ideal learning setting as a whole, but there's a bit of disconnection again, which is a theme. How networked and connected is this place? How well does it communicate with each other, with the different segments? You know, is it physically connected? Is it socially connected? Etc., etc. How do the sectors link across divisions? Okay, boom. Well done. So the comments made there were that internally it's very good, but again this question of the cliqueiness was coming up. But nevertheless, the public setting is a sort of conversational one. I mean, certainly I found it that I'm particularly nosy, very easy to talk to people on the street, and they seem to talk back to you. Well, what I mean is, you don't necessarily find that everywhere, do you? I mean, someone might say like that. So, the place and place-making, it's talking about what you are and have, but it's importantly, how are you developing? And that was the nodule of issues we were trying to work out. Ready, steady, go. I mean, for me, the difficulty was thinking outside of the area I know here, because I know there are other hubs and nodes within Fremantle, some of which are good and so on. The built and social character is clear and identifiable. There's a personality. All of this is good stuff. But somehow there was this point about unfulfilled potential, because not everything is very good, there's some horrible areas and so on, and a sort of fear of the bold, livability and well-being. There was something about, which is making livability difficult, which is the fact that prices in general have gone up in this region so dramatically, irrespective of the real economic conditions in the place. And somehow you've got this weak economic position, but because prices in general are going up, normally what would happen, the prices would be mapped down so that you could innovate upwards and then have that. So that's a real dilemma because of the boom situation in WA. And that actually is pretty intractable, frankly. The other thing about livability is the place is loved. but the need to upgrade, and perhaps the resources aren't there because there is a weakening, an economic weakening. And then the other thing about livability, that the basic things are there and those are provided. It's all very well being imaginative, being on the ball and all of that, but unless you deliver, what's the point? So how well do you think fremantle is, in a sense, walking the talk? Right. I mean, people have a professional attitude, they're competent and all of that, but not necessarily following through. Less walking the talk, lots of token gestures. This was more to do with the local authority, that things lie on the shelf and so on. And in a sense, not pooling talents and resources. Anyway, that was the total score. So there we are, which is broadly a good one, but it hides actually a lot of the real texture, because I think we would agree, and I mean, bearing in mind that I've just been doing this on the hop, if one thought about it a bit more clearly, some of the issues that were raised are quite serious. The question about the square outside here and so on. And the reason why this is quite useful to talk about is simply because there's a slight disagreement about it, which I think is an interesting one. So that's the square. That's who's there again, we know that. That's what it looked like on Tuesday. What we concluded, and I think we all agreed on, that the weakest point, in a sense, was coming from the high street, where it just really sort of flows into nothingness. Whereas from here, actually, you sort of feel that people are, the energy, there's an energy of people sort of trying to flop into the square, which is incredibly positive. So there was weak energy there, strong energy here. And we felt very interesting energy here, and this is where perhaps there's a slight thing about our interpretation of this between, let's say, Andrew and some of us in the group. Because we felt that, it's a very unusual cluster. What do you call them, op shops or something? Mm-hmm. It's pretty unusual. And when you think of Portobello Road, which everybody thinks is unbelievable, that's how Portobello Road started. That was, this is a micro sense, but that was what Portobello Road was. It began to segment itself between real junk and better junk, and it's already happening there when you're just looking at the clothes thing. This is the weak point. I said, jokingly, we need to bribe Rodenhorn to move. And then, of course, the Myers thing, which has an element of sort of beauty or ugliness, depending on where you stand. There's so many ways of softening a building that Patrick Leblanc is the guy who invented all that type of stuff. There are many examples. This is from Shanghai. In order to enliven that space, you need to strengthen those things from the side, and that will pump energy into the square. And then you might have an activity program as well in there, but it's not just the activity program in the square. In a sense, the other things around it are helping sort of pump energy in. It's quite interesting the way you come into the council, from the side, which may be fine, but in a sense, if that was the library, the centre of knowledge, come in, I welcome you. You could just imagine that would be completely different. To put something essential there, I block the library, the other activity will have to go there. So I'm going to suggest that it might be something where we just sort of break the bounds of this, I don't want to call it antagonistic, but this sort of slightly blocked, locked-in thing, to cut that somehow. And one way could be to think of yourself as small enough to make it happen in theory, but big enough to be taken seriously. And that's a very unique thing. There are few places that are well known in the world. Fremantle is well known, leaving aside the America's Cup. It's well known. You're far more well known than your size. You have an unbelievable opportunity, which I don't think many places have. And I think the opportunity is what I called on Tuesday, being a leader, which combines economics, environment, all of that together, and culture, being a leader in creating, or being part of creating the fourth green, clean, lean industrial revolution. And that is, as we well know, there are thousands and thousands of innovations and inventions to be done. It feels to me that it fits with your character. Now, here's Malmo, which this is the Western Harbour, which is completely carbon neutral, which has combined this iconic with the ordinary. You can feel as you're walking around that place, how it's put together. The other one is Freiburg, and I think you are very Freiburg. Freiburg is the sort of green city in Europe. And this is a sort of typical structure they have, yeah? This is 80 units of housing and offices and all that. And they've begun to attract, because of that, that's artists and artists designing that. And I believe this is of a quality. I don't say you should love it or like it, but it looks okay. It's bigger than perhaps your current template. Those people who live there are all eco-entrepreneurs because there's a feed-in tariff. They produce more energy than they use. So each of them is earning 3,000 to 4,000 euros a year. That's, I think, the final picture. That's Shanghai, the Shanghai Pavilion. You see, they've even got an aesthetic there, which is a bit like this green aesthetic, which looks different, goes with the flow. That's it. Come on, let's stop. Yeah?
Fantastic. Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate it.